Hey guys, tonight we sink softly into a job you probably never dreamed about as a kid, unless your kindergarten career day took a seriously dark turn. You're not a knight, not a noble, not even a blacksmith. No, tonight, you're the town's official executioner. You stand at the edge of a muddy field, staring at the wobbly wooden structure locals call the justice stage. It smells like damp straw, blood, and something suspiciously like overcooked cabbage. Your boots squish in the muck. Yep, just stepped in something. Again, this is your life now. But don't worry, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see who else is lying in bed, halfway across the world, dreading their own version of Monday. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You didn't choose this career. In fact, most executioners didn't. It often ran in the family like a cursed heirloom, or, in some grim cases, was assigned as punishment for a past crime. That's right. Sometimes being a hangman was how you paid for your sins, not committed them. You're not allowed to live inside the town walls, by the way. You've got a house just outside the gates, near the pigs, with a rickety wooden sign no one reads because everyone already knows exactly who you are. Kids throw rocks at your window. Adults throw side eyes and muttered prayers. You're both feared and needed, like the medieval version of a septic tank technician. The job description? Oh, it's vague. Serve justice is the nice version. What it really means is hang the petty thief, behead the traitor, draw and quarter the heretic, and burn the witch. Hopefully in that order. If the sentence says death, you're the punchline. Now, you might be thinking, but hey, at least it's steady work? Sort of. You're technically employed by the local lord or magistrate, but your pay is irregular and usually supplemented by strange perks, leftover clothes from the condemned, the right to sell their boots, maybe even a few coins tossed from the crowd if you do a particularly stylish job. There's no salary negotiation. There's also no union. Some weeks, there's no work at all. Other weeks, it's like crime season. 5 hangings in 3 days. Sure. Double shift? You bet. Executions before breakfast? Bring your own axe. Speaking of axes, don't imagine a shiny, perfectly forged blade with runes and a comfortable leather grip. Yours is chipped, rusted, and probably last cleaned during the Crusades. It weighs a ton, and the wooden handle gives you splinters, but it's technically standard issue. The best part? People whisper when you walk by. They avoid your touch like it carries a curse. You can't buy bread without the baker mumbling a prayer to St. Hubert. Your only regular conversations are with your assistant, a teenager who mostly pretends to vomit when you describe how you once had to re-swing an axe. Twice. Let's not forget the lore. According to some old folk tales, the executioner's soul is permanently stained. So yours is definitely not going to heaven, or anywhere pleasant. Some believe you can't step inside a church. Others say your tools should be buried with you, or they'll haunt the next person to use them. That rusty blade? Probably already haunted. And then there's the wardrobe. You don't get armor. You don't get robes. You wear practical layers, something easy to move in, something you don't mind getting blood on. You might have a dark hood, though that's more a theatrical touch than necessity. The hood serves a purpose. not to hide your face from the victim, but from the crowd. People find it easier to cheer for justice if they don't have to look the hangman in the eyes. Historians still argue whether executioners were ever truly anonymous or just locally infamous. The truth likely shifts with the town. In a big city, maybe you were a mystery. In a village, everyone knew you, especially the butcher who keeps asking you if you want the tongue. Let's talk workspace. The gallows might be permanent or just a pop-up. If it's the latter, you build it yourself, usually the night before. Nothing says sweet dreams like hammering together the platform where someone's going to meet their end. The scaffold creaks. The nails never quite sit right, and there's always a chance it collapses mid-hanging. But hey, no pressure. Your tools? Ropes, axes, a torch, maybe a wheeled cart if you're fancy. You keep them in a locked chest, hidden under a tarp. Kids like to sneak in and peek. Once, they stole your spare noose and used it as a swing. You let it go. Technically, you're not allowed to punish anyone outside of a court order. Besides, who's going to believe the swing set came from your office? There's one strange, almost touching part of the job. Before an execution, you usually speak with the condemned. Sometimes it's confession. Sometimes it's just quiet. You get weird little glimpses of humanity. Nervous laughter, stammered regrets, mumbled goodbyes. And sometimes they look you in the eye and say thank you. Not because they want to die, but because they're ready. Or they think you'll make it quick. That's a lot of pressure. And if you flinch or miss, oh, don't worry. We'll get to that in a later section. For now, just remember, no one invites you to feasts. No one sits next to you in church, if you even go. You exist on the fringe. The people cheer when you kill, but cross the street when you walk by. You're justice incarnate, but only when it's convenient. And as you walk home through the muddy path, swinging your sack of tools, listening to the distant clanging of church bells, you wonder, not for the first time, if your soul still counts as yours. The sun's just peeking over the thatched rooftops, but you're already knee-deep in your morning routine. Which is to say, the gallows need tightening, the ropes need checking, and someone left last week's corpse half hanging like a badly strung marionette. Nothing like the gentle creak of old wood and the warm scent of mildew to start your day. You trudge across the dew-slick field, your breath misting in the cold air. The platform feels especially wobbly today, probably rain damage or termites, or both. Either way, you'll have to fix it before the noon hanging. Nobody wants a repeat of the snapped floorboard incident. That poor baker's apprentice hit the ground like a sack of onions and had to be dragged back up for a do-over. The crowd wasn't thrilled. You still hear the laughter in your sleep. First job, coil the ropes. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. They're heavy, coarse, and smell faintly of iron and sweat. You run each length between your hands, checking for weak spots. A frayed rope means disaster, or worse, delay. And if there's one thing you've learned, it's that people hate waiting to see someone die. The mob wants swift justice, not technical difficulties. Your assistant arrives late again. He's supposed to be helping you prep the site, but he's mostly here for the gossip and free apples from the execution day vendors. He shows up chewing something suspicious and points lazily at the chopping block. That's still got blood on it, he mumbles, as if you hadn't noticed the giant rust-colored stain. You sigh and hand him a bucket. The tools must be laid out just so. Axe here, sword there, dagger just in case. Oh, and don't forget the spare rope. That's for emergencies, or for those criminals who suddenly find God and won't stop flailing. Nothing says divine intervention like being tied to a pole with both arms and one ankle. The crowd usually starts gathering before noon. By mid-morning, they're already picking spots, buying sausages, and placing informal bets on how long it'll take you to finish the job. There's a vendor selling meat pies and candied plums. Another guy juggles turnips for tips. It's practically a festival, except instead of fireworks, there's screaming. You're expected to look professional, not noble, not heroic, just competent and cleanish. Some towns require you to wear black. Others want red for the symbolism. But no matter what, your hands are always stained, and no one wants to shake them. Sometimes the condemned arrives early. They come in a wagon, chained, sullen. Some are quiet, staring into nothing. Others cry the whole way. One guy recited dirty limericks right up to the noose. You admired his commitment to bad poetry. You lead them up the steps. The wood groans beneath their feet, and yours. Every step is heavy, both literally and otherwise. You don't rush. The slower the climb, the more time for the crowd to settle in, to build the suspense. You're not just an executioner. You're the opening act and the finale. Now here's the part no one likes to talk about. What it smells like. The gallows area never really airs out. There's old blood in the cracks, dried sweat soaked into the wood, and that earthy, meaty rot you never quite get used to. You keep lavender stuffed in a pouch near your collar, but honestly, it just smells like bloody flowers. Historians still argue whether executions were more frequent during times of peace or war. You've lived through both, and let's just say that no matter what the calendar says, someone's always in trouble with the crown. Petty theft, heresy, treason, goat theft. Yep, someone actually got hanged for stealing a goat once. His name was Elias. He claimed it followed him home. And as you prep the gallows, you wonder what today's story will be. A noblewoman accused of sorcery? A stable boy caught stealing coins? A foreign merchant who looked at the Lord funny? The charges are often vague. The punishment, however, is always crystal clear. By midday, the mood changes. The breeze dies down. The crowd quiets. Children sit on shoulders. Older women press handkerchiefs to their noses. Everyone watches you. The condemned is now center stage. You stand beside them, reading the sentence in a bored, monotone voice, partly for legal formality, partly because you've memorized this speech 6 years ago, and honestly, you're not winning any oratory awards. The priest murmurs last rites. Sometimes the criminal asks for a final word. Sometimes they sing. Once, a woman spat at you and tried to bite your nose. It left a mark, and a new rule about muzzles. And then it's time. You check the knots again. You've learned from experience. One slip, one poorly tied loop, and the poor soul dangles there twitching, while the crowd gasps and throws cabbages. You never forget the sound a person makes when the rope's too short. That wet, struggling gasp, like a broken flute. Today, it's smooth. The rope snaps tight. The crowd exclaims, then murmurs. A few cheer, most just stare. And you clean your hands, pack your tools, and prepare to do it all again tomorrow. There's a superstition some executioners believe in. Never whistle near the gallows. They say it invites ghosts. You don't believe in ghosts, but you still never whistle, just in case. As the crowd begins to shuffle away, muttering about lunch and taxes, you sit on the edge of the platform and watch the sky shift to blue-gray. It might rain, You really hope it doesn't. Wet ropes are the worst. Your assistant brings you a stale meat pie. You take it without a word and chew slowly, staring off toward the woods. Somewhere out there is the next criminal, the next crime, the next excuse for you to step up and do the one job no one else wants. You're part of the cycle now. But for now, you mop the blood, tie off the rope, and whistle softly, just to tempt fate. Later that week, you're summoned by a gruff courier with teeth like scattered tombstones. He delivers the message with all the cheer of a funeral bell. You're needed in Black Hollow. Tomorrow morning. Special case. No explanation, no details. Just that tight knot in your stomach that always appears when someone says special. Black Hollow is 2 days' ride if the roads are clear, which of course they aren't. Rains turn them into bogs with signage. Your assistant groans when he sees the cart. "Do I have to come?" he moans, dragging his heels like a reluctant donkey. You toss him a small sack of jerky. "Yes," you say. "You're my legally obligated witness." He eats the jerky in protest. The cart smells like damp rope and moldy turnips, and the wheels shriek with every turn. You sit beside the driver, a man who hasn't blinked since sunrise. He hums tunelessly and farts every few miles, as if marking territory. You arrive at Black Hollow just after sunset. It's less a village and more a collection of huts trying very hard not to fall over. A single torch flickers near the square, and the inn smells like sour ale and undercooked lamb. You're shown to your room, which is generous, if you consider a straw mat and a bucket generous. Word's already spread. You hear them whispering at the inn. He's here. The hangman. He wears black gloves. You don't. He drinks blood. You prefer tea. The condemned is a local blacksmith accused of consorting with demons, or possibly just brewing his own beer. Hard to tell. The charges are vague again. Unnatural behavior, eyes like night, and strange smells. You'd think half the town would be arrested on that last count. You meet him in the morning. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with soot-stained hands and a voice like thunder in a cellar. He doesn't look scared, just tired. "I didn't do nothing," he mutters, eyes on your boots. "I fix tools. I pray. I feed stray dogs." He pauses. "That last part's probably what got me in trouble." You nod. It's not your job to judge, just to do the final punctuation mark on someone else's sentence. The gallows here are pitiful. Half a platform and a rope that looks like it's been holding up someone's laundry. You rebuild it from scratch, muttering to yourself as you hammer the frame and brace the sides. Your assistant holds nails in his mouth like a chipmunk. A goat watches the entire process with deep suspicion. The villagers gather slowly. No sausages today, no turnip juggling, just wide eyes and tight lips. They clutch their cloaks like they're hiding sins in the folds. As you guide the blacksmith to the platform, it starts to rain. Soft, persistent, like the sky itself is weeping out of habit. The wood slicks beneath your boots. You steady yourself, tie the knot, check the loop. And then he says something strange. "If you see my dog," he whispers, "tell him I tried." It catches you off guard. You pause. For a moment, the world softens. Then your assistant clears his throat. He's holding the death order, barely legible under rain stains. You nod, pull the lever. The drop is clean. No twitching, no sound. Just the dull snap and the hush of the crowd, like a breath drawn and never exhaled. You stay behind to take down the gallows. Town rules. Plus, they're paying you in chickens and 2 loaves of rye bread. Fancy. Later that night, You sit by the inn's fire. The bread's stale, but the chicken stew isn't bad. Your assistant is asleep, snoring into his stew bowl. You stare into the flames, wondering what kind of world declares a man guilty for feeding a stray animal. Historians still argue whether these smaller villages were more prone to witchcraft hysteria, or just used it as a convenient way to get rid of someone too strange, too kind, or too unlucky. Honestly, it's all starting to blur together. You dream of hammers pounding, not gallows, but forge iron, sparks flying, a dog barking nearby. You wake up sweating. The next morning, a child leaves a carved figurine outside your door. A small wooden dog. No note. Just that. You take it. Quietly. Carefully. You tuck it into your satchel between the whetstone and the coin pouch. A ridiculous place for such a sentimental thing. But somehow, it fits. As you leave Black Hollow, the villagers avoid your eyes. No one says goodbye. Not even the goat. The road is still muddy. The wheels still shriek. You don't speak for hours. Finally, your assistant says, "Do you think he really talked to demons?" You don't answer. Not out loud. But part of you thinks the demons aren't the ones being hanged. They're the ones in the crowd. By the time you return to your own village, the bell ringer's already been arrested. Apparently, he was caught selling fake indulgences to travelers. Parchments with heaven guarantee scrawled in chicken scratch. The local friar nearly popped a vein. You're not sure what's worse, the fraud or the spelling. You find yourself back at the execution site before the sun's up, hammering new nails into the platform while trying not to think about the smell clinging to your cloak. Your assistant tosses a moldy apple into the bushes and yawns. "I like the blacksmith," he says. "He seemed decent." "Everyone's decent until someone finds a reason," you reply, and you're not sure if you meant to sound so bitter. The townspeople, of course, are thrilled you're back. Not personally thrilled. Nobody shakes your hand or invites you to supper, but you can feel the energy, like the grim comfort of knowing the outhouse hasn't overflowed yet. You're a necessary horror, familiar, predictable. The condemned this time is a repeat offender. Old Tom. You remember him. He once tried to sell blessed onions to a passing noble, swore they cured gout, lust, and mice infestations. Didn't work, obviously, and now he's facing a charge of heresy mixed with petty theft. A delightful combo. Tom limps up the platform, half drunk and humming. "They won't miss me," he says cheerfully, "but you might. I'm the only one who laughs at your jokes." He's not wrong. You prep the noose with practiced fingers, trying to ignore the twitch in your neck. It's been getting worse lately, this strange ache that settles in when you're alone with the condemned. Almost like guilt trying to hitch a ride on your spine. Tom doesn't beg. He smiles. He winks. And as you pull the lever, he whispers, "Hope I'm right about the onions." The snap is quiet. The crowd is not. They groan, cheer, or mutter, depending on their mood and whether they lost a bet. Someone shouts, "Justice!" and someone else tosses a coin that misses the bucket entirely and lands in the mud. You retrieve it anyway. Every copper counts. That evening, as you wipe your blade and straighten the ropes, the mayor approaches. A thin man with too many rings and not enough empathy. "Busy week ahead," he says casually. "We're clearing the jails. 4 more tomorrow. Might want to sharpen everything." You stare at him. 4 in one day. "Rotations?" you ask. He smirks. "You're the only one who knows how to do it clean." You nod. Of course you are. The next morning is damp and yellow with fog. The first is a woman accused of poisoning her husband with spoiled stew. The second is a boy caught with a stolen purse, though it was empty when they found it. The third, a man who claimed to be the rightful heir to a nearby barony. That one drew a big crowd. The fourth, you hesitate when you see her. She's no older than your assistant, hair matted with leaves, eyes hollow as tree knots, accused of forest magics and unladylike speech. A convenient way of saying she didn't smile enough. The execution goes poorly. The knot slips. She dangles, half choking, feet kicking. The crowd murmurs. You leap forward, adjust, pull the lever again. This time it works. The crowd claps, awkwardly. You clean your tools in silence that night. Your assistant doesn't say a word. Not about her. Not about the others. Just sits by the fire, poking ashes and looking older than he did last week. You ask him, "What's the worst part?" He thinks for a moment. They're starting to blur together. Historians still argue whether executions were meant as justice or theater. But after days like this, you're convinced they're both. Equal parts punishment and public distraction, like a grim morality play where nobody's truly saved. You try to sleep, but your dreams are loud, not with screams, those you can handle. No, it's the silence afterward that gets you, that long, heavy nothing, where no one says thank you and no one says sorry. The next morning, your assistant finds you outside, sanding the gallows post. "You know," he says gently, "we could leave." You look at him, at his calloused hands, at the blood on your boots. "Where would we go?" you ask. He shrugs. "Somewhere without gallows." And for a moment, you allow yourself to imagine it. A quiet hill, a crooked house with a garden, no ropes, no crowds, just birdsong and bread baking. Then the bell rings. Another summons. You pick up your tools. The gallows won't build themselves. You're sent east this time, past the river where the water always smells faintly of boiled cabbage and desperation. The town's called Worms Hollow, though no one remembers why. There are no dragons here, just more rotting planks, mud-smeared signs, and locals who stare at you like you've grown horns. The bailiff meets you at the edge of town. He's sweating through his armor, though it's barely sunrise. "Big one today," he says. "Real popular fellow. Preacher. Talks too much." You raise an eyebrow. "Talks?" "Talks," he confirms, loudly, about sin, salvation, and other things that upset people. He leads you through the center square, past a crumbling fountain filled with rainwater and drowned beetles. The gallows here are warped, the beam sagging like it's already carrying a weight it can't forget. You decide to rebuild it. Again. Your assistant groans and starts sorting nails. By mid-morning, a crowd gathers. Not a festive crowd, not yet, but a restless one, like a pot beginning to simmer. You see vendors setting up early. Candied figs, roasted roots, spiced nuts. A woman offers to read your palm, but when she recognizes you, her smile dies mid-sentence. The preacher is brought out just before noon. He's older than you expected. White hair, hands like twigs, and a voice still sharp enough to slice bark. "You don't have to do this," he tells the bailiff. "You choose to." The bailiff rolls his eyes, but then the preacher turns to you. "And you. I see you. I see the weight you carry." You blink. For a moment, you forget the crowd, the noose, the protocol. His words hang in the air, more potent than any sermon. You go through the motions. Tie the knot, test the lever, tighten the brace. The preacher doesn't flinch. He closes his eyes and whispers something you can't quite catch. A prayer, a curse, or just a goodbye. The drop is silent. The crowd isn't. They boo, not at the execution, but because it ended too fast. No spectacle, no tremble, no writhing, just stillness. You're almost grateful. As you pack up your gear, a boy runs up to you, dirt on his face and a paper in his hand. He wrote this, he says, shoving it into your palm before bolting off. It's not a sermon, it's a poem. Short, strange, something about seeds in the soil, and how even the darkest roots reach for light. You fold it carefully and slip it inside your coat, next to the wooden dog. That evening, the innkeeper gives you a free meal. Thank you for keeping order, she says, not meeting your eyes. The stew's hot but flavorless. You chew mechanically. Your assistant finally breaks the silence. That preacher scared me. Why? He wasn't afraid. Not at all. It's like he'd already left. You nod. You felt it too. Something about the way he stood, like he'd peeled himself out of his body and handed you the skin. Historians still argue whether such figures were true heretics or simply threats to the status quo, people who refused to shut up when silence became law. Some say they were prophets. Others say they were mad. You suspect it's usually both. Back on the road, the wind carries the smell of wet leaves and charred pine. You pass a shrine to St. Dunbar, the so-called patron of rope burn. Pilgrims leave bits of twine there for luck. You chuckle. We should leave something, you joke. Your assistant, surprisingly, does. A nail. He places it gently beneath the stone, then walks off without saying a word. You don't ask why. That night, you camp near the river. The stars are faint, smothered by clouds, but you hear owls calling across the dark. Do you ever think we're on the wrong side? Your assistant asks softly. You stir the fire. I think we're not even on a side, just caught in the middle. He nods, says nothing else. But you know what he means, and you don't have an answer. You fall asleep to the sound of frogs and far-off thunder, the preacher's words still echoing in your skull. You choose to. Do you? Maybe. You wake to rain. Not the gentle kind that whispers on canvas and lulls you back to sleep, but the kind that hits like thrown pebbles and soaks you to the bone before you've even opened your eyes. Your cloak clings to you like regret. Your assistant curses as he wrings out his socks. Still, you pack up camp. There's always somewhere else to be. Another square with a scaffold that needs fixing. Another list of names passed down from someone who never dirties their own hands. The next town is Elmbrook. You remember it, not fondly. It's where someone once mistook you for a priest and confessed their sins for nearly an hour before realizing the mistake. They still waved goodbye. Elmbrook is small, damp, and incredibly fond of pickled eels. You try not to breathe too deeply as you cross the bridge. The town has a strange request this time. No public execution, at least not in the square. We're trying something new, the constable says. More dignified. You glance at the old pillory, half collapsed in the weeds. Dignified, you repeat, as if trying the word on for size. Instead, they've set up a makeshift chamber behind the granary. Dark, echoey, and filled with the musty scent of mold and oats. It's intimate, which is a terrible word for what's about to happen. The condemned is a baker. You almost laugh when they tell you. What did he do? Burn the bread. Number. He refused to bake for a local magistrate who accused his daughter of witchcraft, claimed the man was cursed and wouldn't eat a crumb touched by him. Naturally, that didn't go over well. The man is kind-eyed and soft-spoken. He speaks of his ovens like they were old friends. They're warm, he says, and honest. They don't lie like people do. You almost want to ask for a recipe. He kneels easily, doesn't struggle. But as you raise your tool, quick, clean, practiced, he murmurs something strange. Every loaf has its last crust. You don't understand it. Not then, but it stays with you. You exit the chamber into the drizzle. No crowd, no clapping, just you, your assistant, and the quiet churn of flour mills in the distance. Back at the inn, the fire is low and the chairs are mismatched. You eat stew again. You always eat stew. You wonder sometimes if your taste buds have all given up and moved elsewhere. Across the room, two merchants whisper, glancing at you between sips. You're used to it. You're more rumor than man now. They call you the quiet blade in some places, rope eye in others. Your assistant once joked you should start charging for autographs. You told him the ink would just smear from the rain anyway. Historians still debate whether traveling executioners were respected or feared. Some were granted pensions and property. Others vanished mysteriously, left behind in shallow graves or forgotten inns. You suspect the answer is both. Revered one week, reviled the next. A sword in human form. Useful until it points the wrong way. You leave Elmbrook by moonlight, the road slick and shining. It's quiet, save for the occasional owl or cough from your assistant, who's clearly caught something again. You ever think about how many last words we've heard? He asks, voice raspy. You nod. Most of them don't mean anything, but a few stick. Like the onion guy, you grin. Especially him. You reach a fork in the road. North goes to Thornbridge, cold, dour, and crawling with inquisitors. South leads to Ravenmere, where the last executioner vanished without a trace. You flip a coin. It lands in the mud. So you pick north? Of course you do. The next morning, the rain clears. Just a little. Enough to see your breath in the air and the frost clinging to the grass like it's afraid to let go. As you trudge along, a cart passes by. Its driver offers no words, just a nod and a nervous glance. In the back, cages. Inside them, silent figures wrapped in cloaks and chains. You count 6, maybe 7. One stares at you through the bars. No hatred, just curiosity. You look away. You find yourself humming a tune you don't remember learning. Something soft, lullaby-like. Your assistant joins in, out of key. Doesn't feel like a job anymore, he says after a while. What does it feel like? He thinks. Like we're part of a story, but no one wrote the ending. You want to tell him that's how all stories work, but you don't. Because maybe this one's different. Maybe no one finishes it because no one wants to. The road to Thornbridge grows crueler with every mile. Narrower, rockier, more eager to snap a wheel or twist an ankle. The trees here seem taller, older, leaning in like they're trying to overhear your thoughts. Even the birds are quieter, as if they too are being watched. You pass a wooden sign, carved in a hasty scrawl. All are judged. It creaks ominously as you go by. Thornbridge doesn't waste time on subtlety. By the time you arrive, your boots are caked in mud, and your assistant is coughing up something concerning. We need a dry bed, he mutters, teeth chattering. But Thornbridge doesn't offer comfort. Just cold stone, thick fog, and the distinct smell of overly cautious paranoia. The guards here don't ask for names. They already have them. One of them even calls you by yours. Not a title, not a nickname. Your actual name. You freeze for a beat longer than you should. That evening, a letter arrives. No sender. Just your name. Again, in ink that looks suspiciously like dried blood. The message is simple. He waits beneath the bell. Your assistant raises an eyebrow. Dramatic. You sigh. Let's go see what judgment looks like. The bell tower looms above Thornbridge like a preacher's finger, always pointing, never helping. You descend the stairs beneath it and find a man in chains, not iron ones, but velvet ropes, symbolic. Worse, he smiles at you like he knows your childhood. Executioner, he says, do you dream? You stare. I used to, he continues, of rivers, rivers full of mirrors. You'd bend down to drink and see every lie you've ever told staring back. You don't respond. Instead, you examine the room. Stone walls, scattered straw, not a trace of weaponry. This isn't a prison, it's a theater. And he's the star. His crime? Reading banned texts. Not preaching them, not selling them, just reading. Alone. Quietly. And someone told someone who told someone else, and now here he is. You're not given instructions. Just an expectation. Make it slow. One official mutters. People need reminders. Reminders of what? That even thoughts can be crimes? You consider the options. No gallows here, no axe, just rope and a platform. The man walks up to it himself, barefoot, humming a hymn no one sung in 100 years. As you secure the knot, he looks at you and says, "They never feared me. Only what I noticed." Then he thanks you, not sarcastically, genuinely, as though your hands offer him something cleaner than what the world above ever gave. Historians still argue whether Thornbridge was a center of justice or a crucible of fear. The records are precise, but strangely emotionless. They detail procedures, not people. No one mentions the humming. That night, sleep evades you. Every time you close your eyes, you see him. Not his face, his feet, dangling, still, silent. You dream of rivers, not ones with mirrors, but ones where hands reach up from beneath, grabbing at your ankles. You don't tell your assistant. The next morning, you try to leave. Thornbridge delays you with papers, fees, blessings, warnings. You nod at all of them, barely listening. A woman stops you at the edge of town. She offers you bread. "For the road," she says. Then she adds, "You're not what I expected." You almost ask what she did expect, but decide against it. You're tired of finding out what people think you are. You eat the bread in silence. As you walk, your assistant finally speaks. What did he mean? About dreaming? You shrug. Probably that the worst prisons don't have walls. He frowns. I don't like it here. Neither do I. The fog doesn't lift until you're miles away. In the distance, the bell tolls once. Just once. You don't turn around. The road eventually leads you to a wide plain. Open, windswept, and almost unnaturally quiet. After the thick woods and grim towns behind you, the emptiness feels disorienting, like you've wandered onto a stage mid-performance with no script to follow. You pass a field of scarecrows. At least you think they're scarecrows. Too many of them. Too carefully arranged, and none in fields that actually seem to grow anything. Your assistant avoids looking at them altogether. I don't like when the birds aren't scared, he mutters, pulling his cloak tighter. Means the scarecrows didn't work. You walk faster. Eventually, the village of Brindle emerges on the horizon, barely more than a cluster of low-roofed houses, a leaning steeple, and a single crooked tavern. But even before you enter it, you notice something's off. There's no smell of smoke, no sound of hammers or livestock, no children laughing or doors slamming, just stillness, thick as wool. A woman greets you in the street, her smile wide but eyes glassy. "The harvest fair," she says. "You've come just in time." There's no fair, not in the usual sense. No ribbons or pies, or tipsy minstrels juggling radishes. Instead, There's a platform in the center of the square, not raised, but sunk, like a pit, ringed with torches and garlands of dry weeds. You're told your presence is ceremonial. No executions today, they say with relief. Just an ending. You try to ask what that means, but no one answers clearly. The so-called celebration begins at dusk. Everyone dresses in pale robes. Even your assistant is handed one. You're exempt, of course. You're the witness. No one ever clarifies what that entails, but they treat you with the reverence usually reserved for traveling saints or dangerous weapons. In the pit, a single man stands, voluntarily, silent. His name is Elias. He's the town's record keeper, gray-bearded, mild-eyed, and apparently guilty of nothing except aging. They say he knows too much, your assistant whispers, about everyone. You find this oddly familiar. You've seen towns like this before, places that mask guilt as tradition, that bury shame under flowers and call it folklore. As the crowd hums some eerie, tuneless song, Elias lifts a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, pages, dozens of them, scribbled notes, diagrams, memories. It's the story of this place, he says, too heavy to carry any further. Then he sets it ablaze, and when the flames die down, he steps into the smoke. Just vanishes. No trapdoor, no scream, no body. Historians still argue whether the brindle rite was spiritual, symbolic, or something more sinister. The written records stop after Elias. No one else ever kept notes again. Some think the pit was sacred. Others think it was just deep. You don't sleep that night. The townspeople feast and dance and pretend they aren't haunted by what they just saw. Your assistant drinks too much mead and ends up vomiting near the scarecrow field. You keep watch. Something about the silence here feels predatory. At dawn, the villagers give you bread, water, and a single word. Forget. You nod, though you won't. You never do. As you walk away, your assistant asks, "Do you think he really vanished?" "No," you reply. "I think they buried the truth in plain sight." A wind picks up behind you. You don't look back. The road forward is cracked and winding. You pass another traveler going the other way. She carries a sack of herbs and a staff marked with carvings. She pauses, eyes you, and smiles. "Executioner," she says, as if recognizing your scent. "You'll want to avoid the southern marshes. Spirits don't like iron." You raise an eyebrow. "Good thing I carry steel." She grins. Not much of a difference to the dead. She walks on. You watch her vanish into the mist. Then you keep moving. In the distance, the horizon turns darker. Trees thin. The ground begins to glisten. Not from dew, but from something thicker. The scent of salt and rot begins to rise. You're headed to the marshes of Hollowmere. You've heard of them, of course. Everyone has. It's where old wrongs go to sleep, or at least where people pretend they did. The path into Hollowmere is less of a trail and more of a slow surrender. One moment, you're walking solid ground. The next, your boot sinks into something soft and wet, and it never quite feels firm again. The marsh stretches in every direction, flat, sallow, smothered in mist, and your world shrinks to a radius of about 10 feet. "You sure this is the right way?" your assistant mutters, ankle deep in muck. "Define right," you reply, as a dragonfly the size of a spoon buzzes past your ear. Hollowmere isn't on most maps, and that's the point. It's the kind of place people whisper about in inns after their fourth ale. Some say it was a battlefield. Others, a mass grave. One old man swore it was built on top of a drowned abbey, where monks made deals with things that don't belong in scripture. and now you're here. Because apparently, even a place like this needs judgment. Your summons came in the form of a dead fish, wrapped in parchment, left outside your tent one morning. The message was clear. We have a name. We need a blade. So here you are, chasing justice into a swamp that doesn't even like sunlight. The marsh plays tricks on your senses. Shapes flicker in the fog. Voices echo where there are no mouths. Once, you see someone who looks like your mother, just for a moment. Then she's gone, replaced by a reed shivering in the wind. The accused is a man named Gale, mid-30s by your guess, eyes like wet stone. He lives in a hut built on stilts, surrounded by jars filled with teeth. Human ones. He doesn't deny anything. They come to me, he says, when they've lost everything else, and I give them something back. You ask what, exactly, he gives. Closure, he replies, or at least the illusion of it. You're still not sure what his crime is. The people who sent for you never actually said. Just that he's wrong, that he unsettles the natural order, as if that's a measurable offense. You spend the night in his hut, more out of obligation than trust. The air inside is thick with incense and the scent of dried mushrooms. You dream of mirrors again, but this time they show you smiling, wearing someone else's face. Historians still argue whether Holomir was ever governed by actual law or just a tangle of fear and superstition. The region had no nobility, no clergy, no written code, just stories. And those, as you're beginning to realize, are often deadlier than facts. In the morning, Gale offers you a choice. Take my head, he says, or take a memory. You ask, whose? He shrugs. Anyone's, including yours. You decline. Politely. You leave him there, alive. It's not mercy. It's exhaustion. You're tired of being the last link in a chain of vague accusations. Your assistant doesn't question your decision. He just looks relieved. As you wade back through the bog, a voice calls from the reeds, "He took something from me." You turn, blade half drawn, but see no one. Was it real? Your assistant asks once you're out of the marsh. No idea, you reply, but I'm not paid to chase ghosts. Still, the voice follows you in your thoughts, echoing through the next miles like a cough you can't shake. The ground becomes firmer, the air less damp, but your clothes never quite dry. You carry the marsh in your scent, in the way your boots squelch with every step. Eventually, you reach the edge of the King's Road again, dry, cobbled, and oddly comforting in its banality. Your assistant exhales like he's been holding his breath for days. You don't say anything. Just tighten your belt, adjust your cloak, and look ahead. There's a new summons waiting. A village built into a cliff. A noble whose son died in a duel. A verdict no one agrees with. Justice doesn't rest, and neither do you. The cliffside village of Grensvale greets you with a stark contrast to the marshlands. Dry stone walls etched by wind and salt. Narrow streets winding upward like a staircase to the sky. The smell here is sharp. Sea spray mixed with burnt wood and distant livestock. You can almost taste the salt on your tongue as you ascend. Your arrival is met with cautious eyes and hushed whispers. Nobles and peasants alike seem united in their suspicion, bound by grief over a son lost in a duel. One they say was unfair, one they say was just. The verdict, however, remains undecided, and your role as executioner now extends beyond mere physical judgment. You are asked to weigh the intangible, honor, revenge, and justice. You meet Lord Harrow, a man whose face is a map of every harsh decision he's ever made. His son died, they say, by the blade of another noble's heir, a duel sparked by a foolish insult and fueled by pride. The problem? No witnesses besides the duelists themselves, and one of them is already dead. You're handed the weapon involved, a slender rapier, cold and beautiful, with an inscription you can barely decipher. Historians still argue whether dueling was a formalized legal proceeding or a reckless gamble cloaked in ritual. Here, it feels like both. The villagers are divided. Some claim the duel was honorable, a rightful end to a feud. Others whisper about poison, tricks, and a planned assassination. You watch the faces, their eyes flicking between each other like wary animals. The defendant, young Lord Aemon, is nowhere to be found. Rumors say he fled, leaving his fate to the court and the executioner. That night, you sit by the fire with a village elder who tells you of a local tradition. Before judgment, the executioner must touch the weapon in question and dream the truth of its last use. It sounds like superstition, but here, in Grensvale, superstition weighs heavily on justice. You close your eyes that night, holding the rapier. The dream that comes isn't of violence, but of silence. The hush of a hidden glade, the rustle of leaves, and the faintest scent of lavender. You see two shadows, one reaching for the other, hesitant, trembling. Then a flash, a slip, a fall, a hand closing too tightly. You wake with the dawn, heart pounding and palms sweating. Historians still argue whether such rituals ever held real sway or were mere psychological games. But here, it feels like the only truth you have. The morning court assembles. Villagers gather in the square, faces pale and expectant. Lord Harrow stands solemn, awaiting your verdict. The air is thick with tension, as if the entire village holds its breath. You clear your throat. Without clear evidence, judgment must rest on the honor and intent we can discern. But honor is a fragile thing, easily broken. You pause, letting your words hang. The duel was a tragedy born of pride and poor counsel. Neither side is blameless, yet only one has fallen. Your assistant glances at you, eyebrows raised. You continue. In this, justice is not a sword, but a balance. It is not for me to decide guilt or innocence, only to remind you all of the weight of your actions. The crowd murmurs. Lord Harrow nods slowly, accepting the verdict with a weary dignity. Later, as you prepare to leave, a young woman approaches. She offers you a small vial of lavender oil. For dreams, she says softly. You'll need it. You pocket the vial, a faint smile tugging at your lips. The cliffside village fades behind you as the sun climbs higher, the scent of salt and lavender mingling in the air. You wonder what dreams will come next. Leaving the salty cliffs behind, you find yourself descending into a valley shrouded in fog and mystery, a place called Grey Hollow. The name alone sounds like a warning, but the locals speak of it in hushed tones, as if naming it aloud might summon the shadows lurking there. You trudge through damp underbrush, the fog thick enough to mute sounds and dull colors. Everything feels softened, like the edges of reality have been rubbed smooth by time and secrets. Your footsteps seem unusually loud in this quiet. Grey Hollow is a place where rumors grow wild. It's said to be cursed, or blessed, depending on who you ask. They say no one leaves unchanged. Some claim it's a refuge for the desperate. Others whisper about a secret court that executes justice beyond law. You arrive at a ramshackle cabin on the edge of a swamp, where a man named Corbin awaits you. He's gaunt, with eyes that flicker nervously, like a cornered animal. He confesses he's accused of witchcraft, though no one knows exactly what he's supposed to have done. You can't see it, can you? He asks, voice barely a whisper. The marks, the signs, the curse. You squint, but all you see are bruises and scars, likely self-inflicted or the result of angry townsfolk. Still, you feel an odd chill, as if the air itself has thickened. Historians still argue whether medieval accusations of witchcraft were rooted in genuine fear or convenient scapegoating. Here in Grey Hollow, it feels like a tangled web of both. Corbin tells you of dreams that invade his sleep, visions of pale figures with hollow eyes and long fingers. He says the hollow itself watches, waiting. You're asked to carry out the sentence, but hesitate. The evidence is thin, the accusation vague, and the man seems more prisoner of paranoia than crime. Instead, you offer a deal. Exile to the distant forests beyond the valley. It's a sentence both cruel and merciful, an uncertain fate, but one that spares his life. As you escort Corbin through the fog, you notice the landscape shift. Trees bending as if whispering secrets, shadows flickering just beyond your sight. When you leave him at the forest's edge, Corbin looks back once, eyes wide. You don't know what you've unleashed. You wonder if that's true. If some judgments are too heavy to carry, no matter how far you walk. Back in Grey Hollow, the villagers watch you leave, their faces blank. No thanks. No curses. Only silence. You wonder if justice here is less about punishment and more about survival. The mist curls around you as you move on, thick and unyielding. You think about that man's dreams and wonder if they were just his or something older waiting in the shadows. The road out of Grey Hollow twists into rugged hills cloaked with ancient pines, the air turning cooler and filled with the scent of resin and earth. Your boots crunch over needles and stones, the silence only broken by distant caws and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. You feel the weight of the journey settling into your bones, as if every mile behind you layers onto the heavy armor you wear, not metal, but memory. You arrive at a monastery perched precariously on a cliff's edge, overlooking a churning river far below. Its stone walls are stained with time and storms, its windows thin slits of light. The monks inside speak in murmurs, their eyes wary but respectful when you enter. They tell you their order once served as executioners themselves, carrying out the harsh justice decreed by kings and nobles, but grew weary of the bloodshed. Now, they offer sanctuary for those condemned, believing in redemption rather than punishment. You find this both comforting and infuriating. After all, your role has always been to deliver finality, to end stories, not offer second chances. One monk, Brother Matthias, approaches you with a worn manuscript. It tells of a forgotten ritual, execution not by blade, but by confession and penance, where the condemned could write their sins into a ledger and find peace without death. Historians still argue whether such rituals were widespread or merely hopeful myths, whispered among the desperate. The monks invite you to witness one such confession. A woman accused of theft, a crime of desperation, sits before the abbot. She speaks softly, revealing a life twisted by hunger and loss. You watch as the abbot inscribes her story in the ledger, then pronounces her sentence: years of service to the monastery and the community. No death, no blood. It strikes you as both merciful and unsettling. Mercy feels strange in your hands, like trying to hold water. That night, you sleep in the cold stone chamber of the monastery. The air smells faintly of candle wax and old paper. You dream of ink spreading across parchment. blotting out names and histories, rewriting fate. When dawn breaks, you prepare to leave, but Brother Matthias stops you. Not all justice is final, he says. Sometimes it's the beginning of a new path. You nod, a quiet understanding passing between you. As you step outside, the wind carries the distant sound of the river roaring below, a reminder that life flows on, relentless and unyielding. You think about the executioner's role, not just to end life, but to mark the moment where the past meets the future. Your journey is far from over. From the quiet monastery, you descend toward a bustling market town named Eldermere, where the scent of spices, smoke, and sweat hangs heavy in the air. The narrow streets teem with merchants hawking wares, children darting between legs, and the occasional street performer balancing precariously on wooden stilts. Life here is loud, chaotic, and unapologetically alive. Quite the contrast from the silent judgment halls and lonely marshes you've grown accustomed to. You're here on summons from the town council, who have a problem that no sword can easily solve. A series of petty thefts, escalating tension, and a fragile peace that threatens to shatter. Your role shifts from executioner to mediator, the blade replaced by words and presence. The accused is a scrappy youth named Runa, no older than 16, caught pilfering food and trinkets to support her struggling family. The townspeople are divided. Some want harsh punishment, others sympathy. The council asks you to weigh in, but you know justice here is never simple. As you observe the town, you notice the signs of desperation everywhere. Empty stalls, tired faces, and children with hollow eyes. It's a reminder that sometimes crime is less a choice than a survival tactic. You meet Runa in a dimly lit cell, where the smell of damp stone and stale bread makes your stomach rumble. She meets your gaze with a mixture of defiance and fear, like a wild animal cornered but unwilling to give up without a fight. Historians still argue whether medieval justice was more about social control or genuine fairness. Here, it feels like a bit of both. You ask Runa about her life, her family, her dreams, her fears. She tells you about a sick mother, a baby sister, and the gnawing hunger that never quite goes away. Rather than pass sentence, you propose a deal. Runa will work with the town's blacksmith, learning a trade in exchange for her freedom. It's a gamble. And some council members grumble at your leniency, but the mayor nods, understanding that sometimes mercy is the only way to keep peace. As you leave Eldermere, you catch the faintest smile from Runa, a spark of hope in her eyes. You wonder if this small act of grace will ripple through the town like a secret current, unseen but powerful. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the marketplace as the sounds of life carry on. You realize justice is as much about survival as it is about retribution. And survival, it seems, often requires more than a sword. You leave the bustling market town behind, trekking into a dense forest whose canopy filters the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of green and gold. The air is thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the distant call of birds echoes like a forgotten song. Here, among the ancient trees, you arrive at a clearing where the remnants of a gallows stand. A weathered frame twisted by time, telling silent stories of judgment past. This place is known as the Whispering Grove, a sacred site where executioners once gathered not only to carry out sentences, but to seek guidance and solace. The trees themselves seem to lean in, listening for secrets and confessions. You meet a group of aging executioners, men and women who have walked this path before you. their faces etched with lines deeper than any blade could carve. They speak softly, voices heavy with the weight of their deeds and the loneliness that follows. One shares a tale of a prisoner who spoke of forgiveness on the scaffold, a rare and haunting mercy that lingered in the executioner's heart long after the deed was done. Another recalls the strange dream they had before an execution, visions of shadows transforming into light. Historians still argue whether such rituals were common or isolated, but here, in the heart of the forest, they feel as real as the soil beneath your feet. You are invited to join a quiet ceremony where each executioner lays down a token, a blade, a rope, a mask, in tribute to those they have judged. The air hums with a strange peace, a momentary lifting of the burden you all carry. You place your own token, a simple iron ring, into the earth. It's a symbol of the cycle you've witnessed: life, death, and the fragile balance in between. As twilight deepens, the forest seems to breathe around you, shadows lengthening like gentle hands reaching out. You feel the presence of those who came before and those who will follow. The path of the executioner is lonely, filled with hard choices and heavier silence. But here, among the whispering trees, you find a fleeting kinship, a quiet reminder that even the darkest roles carry the hope of light. The stars begin to peek through the canopy as you prepare to leave, the forest song fading into the night. You step forward, ready for the final chapter of your journey. The final stretch of your journey brings you to the edge of a vast moor, where the wind sweeps low and wild across the heather, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. The sky above is a rolling gray canvas, heavy with clouds that threaten to burst, but hold their tears a while longer. The ground is soft beneath your feet, the peat bogs lurking unseen like hidden traps. You arrive at a solitary stone tower, its walls thick and cold, rising like a sentinel against the endless horizon. Inside, you find the last executioner of the realm, a man named Aldrich, whose hands bear the scars of countless judgments and whose eyes reflect a weariness that words cannot capture. Aldrich speaks quietly of the toll this life takes, the isolation, the haunting memories, and the burden of wielding death not just as punishment, but as a grim necessity. He tells you of the legends surrounding executioners, feared and shunned, yet essential to the fragile order of society. You sit with him as the wind howls outside, sharing stories of trials, dreams, and the strange rituals that have followed you both along your separate paths. He mentions an odd custom, the executioner's confession, a moment when they confess their own fears and regrets to a trusted confidant, seeking relief from the weight they carry. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly isolated outcasts or part of a secret brotherhood with its own codes and camaraderie. Aldrich believes it's both, a paradox of solitude and shared understanding. As night falls, you both perform the confession ritual, speaking aloud the doubts and shadows that have followed you, releasing them into the quiet air. You feel a lightness, subtle but real, as if the years of burden have shifted just enough to let in a sliver of peace. The dawn breaks slowly over the moor, pale and soft, washing the land in gentle light. You realize that the life of an executioner is not just about endings. It's about the moments in between, the fragile threads of mercy, justice, and humanity woven through a harsh world. As you prepare to leave, Aldrich offers a simple gift, a worn leather-bound journal. Its pages filled with stories and reflections from those who walked this path before. You tuck it close, knowing that your journey and the stories you carry will live on. The moor stretches endlessly before you, a wild and open horizon. You step forward, ready to face whatever comes next. The wind slows now, the wildness fading like a distant memory. Your breath eases, the weight in your chest lightening as your thoughts settle like leaves drifting to the forest floor. The world around you softens, colors dimming into gentle shades of twilight. It's okay to rest now, to let the stories you've carried drift away like smoke on a calm breeze. Remember, history is not just about what happened, but how it feels in the spaces between. The silences, the whispers, the shadows that shape us. You've walked a difficult path tonight, seen the world through eyes heavy with burden and mercy. Now, it's time to let those images dissolve, to float in the quiet warmth of your own breath. Feel the soft pull of sleep drawing you down, deeper into calm, where dreams may come gentle and kind. The night embraces you, a quiet companion holding you safe until morning. Sweet dreams.